I just watched Oppenheimer. Is it any good? How many butter pumps will it get? Let's find out.
My baby likes butter.
Hello, my butter babies. So let's get into Oppenheimer. As I said in my fresh out of the theater reaction, this is such an important movie to see. Truly, every American should see this movie. I say that because there was so much history in this movie that I didn't even know about. I knew about the Manhattan Project. I knew about a guy by the name of Oppenheimer who headed it all up. I knew about World War II and the atomic bomb. I knew about Hiroshima and Nagasaki and how us dropping the bomb on them ended the war once and for all. But that's about it. This movie does a deep dive not only into the making of the atomic bomb, but the existential and literal fallout from the dropping of that bomb. If you've ever wondered why we have nukes pointed at each other to this very day, Oppenheimer answers that question. Because most of us who have had even the most remedial of high school history classes know the broad strokes of the movie. In fact, I just covered them. In this review, I want to talk more about the deep dive it takes into the lives of one or two of the main players in the story. Then I want to talk about the greater ramifications the movie gets into surrounding World War II and the atomic bomb. So firstly, let's get into the man himself, Oppenheimer, played here brilliantly by Cillian Murphy. He was not a likable character, quite honestly. He was a womanizer, he was cold and unfeeling, he was passionate about his work, but in a way that was as detached as he was. He was a theoretical physicist, and his character was as cold and unfeeling as the science in which he worked. Now, that's not to say he was a robot, far from it. In fact, he was as passionate about liberal politics as he was about physics. So much so that a very large chunk of this movie is dedicated to him being accused of communism. Because at the time, communism was associated with liberal ideologies such as trade unions and racial integration, two things Oppenheimer vocally supported. But for as liberal as the man was, he had a blind spot when it came to ambition. It was alluded to that him heading up the team that built the atomic bomb was as much about ending the war as it was about him building his own political power. And in fact, by the end of the war, he was arguably one of the most powerful men in the entire world. But that power came at a price, and it wasn't to be his for very long. We'll get to that in a moment. As I said, Oppenheimer was really not a likable man. It was really hard to be on his side for anything, quite frankly, for most of the movie. The way he moved through the first 2 hours of this movie and the choices he made regarding the building of the bomb in those first 2 hours were portrayed not as ruthless and cruel, but rather as very calculating and scientific. The human cost of dropping the bomb wasn't even really discussed in depth until the third act of the film. It's at this point, when the bomb is nearly complete, that Oppenheimer starts to have second thoughts about it. By this point, Hitler was dead. Germany had surrendered. The only country still holding out was Japan, and they could have easily been defeated by a coordinated attack from all the Allies at the same time. And in fact, that option is brought up by Oppenheimer in one of his many meetings with the military and political powers that be. The military turned down that idea flat because they didn't want to lose any more American lives. Oppenheimer then suggested we could maybe do a demonstration off the coast of Japan of the power that could be unleashed by the atomic bomb. That way, no innocent lives would be lost. Unfortunately, that too was rejected. So Oppenheimer spends the last act of the movie racked with terrible guilt over the thousands upon thousands of lives that were lost because of his creation. The guilt is so overwhelming, he does everything he can to block the United States from creating a hydrogen bomb. The period right after World War II was known as the Cold War, where Russia and the United States were in a race to basically win the "my dick is bigger than yours" contest when it came to nuclear capability. There was ample evidence Russia was developing its own atomic weaponry. So the United States wanted to move forward with developing a hydrogen bomb. As I said, Oppenheimer was vehemently opposed to developing our capabilities in that direction. In fact, he believed the United States and Russia could be transparent with one another and share information with one another to bring about lasting peace. And he took that idea on the road, speaking to any crowd that would have him, that would give him a platform and a microphone. Of course, this did absolutely nothing to endear him to the powers that be. So much so that eventually his political enemies, headed by Lewis Strauss, publicly humiliated him, stripped him of his security clearance, and for all intents and purposes, basically got rid of him. What I really appreciated about this film is it did not shy away from the horrors of war, nor did it shy away from the choices those in power made when better choices were presented to them. The film goes to great lengths to state that before the bomb was dropped, the war for all intents and purposes was already over. They could have saved countless lives by mounting an all-out attack on Japan. At that point, even though Japan had sworn to keep fighting to the bitter end, the truth is it was far outnumbered by Allied countries. Sure, Allied forces would have faced losses, but those losses would have been far fewer than the estimated 215,000 lives that were lost when the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And by the way, that's a conservative number. The actual number of people that actually died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it's been said, will never truly be known. It's just a rough guesstimate that up to around 215,000 lives were lost, but we'll never know for sure how many. Not only that, but the Emperor of Japan at the time made the choice not to immediately surrender after the first bomb was dropped, therefore signing the death certificate of all the people of Nagasaki only a week later. It was only then Emperor Hirohito surrendered. So many innocent lives around the world were lost because of warmongering heads of state whose taste for blood far exceeded the grasp of their moral compasses. This movie lies bare those men who would, without hesitation, choose war over peace. This movie is a talkie. There's not a lot of action in the 3-hour runtime, but even so, during more than a few times in the film, I was on the edge of my seat. The way this film builds tension is nothing short of brilliant. Because I know the broad strokes of the history this film is based off of, I knew how it was going to end. I knew they would successfully build a bomb, and I knew that they would successfully test it in Los Alamos. I knew 2 bombs would be dropped on Japan, on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I knew that the war would end. That I knew all of these broad strokes of history didn't matter. This movie drew me in and kept me there for most of its 3-hour runtime. That's in large part thanks to Christopher Nolan. He is a true auteur. And while Best Picture and Best Director Oscar wins have yet to be given to him, Oppenheimer may be his golden ticket. This film is a pure Christopher Nolan film. It doesn't tell its story linearly. It jumps back and forth through time. It's a talkie. It plays with black and white and color. It takes itself seriously, maybe a little too seriously, but then again, not everything needs to be a comedy. And it's probably 35 to 40 minutes too long. That being said, this is truly Nolan's year to take home multiple Oscars. He will be nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Director, and Oppenheimer will be nominated for Best Picture, and because Christopher Nolan is a producer on this film, he will be nominated for that category as well. We have a few more people that may possibly join Nolan on stage collecting their gold as well. Cillian Murphy is a clear frontrunner for Best Actor. You went on a journey with him as Oppenheimer, and although you may not have liked him for 2/3 of this movie, you were on the ride with him. Robert Downey Jr. is an absolute lock for Best Supporting Actor. In fact, out of everyone involved in this movie, he is the one that will most assuredly win an Oscar. If for no other reason than it's his turn. He was nominated for Best Actor, actually, for Chaplin way back in the day. He led the most successful movie franchise of all time as Iron Man. He is literally the Hollywood comeback kid. He started off strong in the mid-80s, crashed and burned by the mid-90s, and slowly crawled his way back into Hollywood's good graces. And look at him now, on top of the Hollywood world. To be sure, he is positively brilliant in this movie. And he 100% deserves the Oscar that he most assuredly will win. But it's not even about whether or not he deserves it. It's about whether or not it's his turn. Oppenheimer is his turn. I could maybe see Josh Hartnett also getting nominated for Best Supporting Actor. He is so transformative in his role. I had no idea it was him until after the movie was over and I saw his name in the credits and I was like, wait, whoa, Josh Hartnett's in this movie? Sure enough, he's in this movie. He is transformative in this movie, and I could see him getting a nod for his performance. Also, maybe Matt Damon will snag a support role nod, but that feels like an outlier to me. Same way with a Best Supporting Actress nod for Emily Blunt. That's an outlier, a deserving outlier, but still both of those are a long shot. All of the acting in this movie is top notch. There are no weak links in the entire bunch. Even Florence Pugh in the thankless role of the other woman did well with the very little she had to work with. Best cinematography, best costume design, best editing, best score, best sound, best production design, maybe, best hair and makeup design, maybe. All these are, if not locks, definitely likely categories for Oppenheimer to be nominated for Oscars. So, How many butter pumps am I going to give Oppenheimer? 5. That's right, 5 butter pumps. As I said at the top of this video, this is such an important movie to see. All Americans should see it because we are still living with the very real and very scary consequences of what happened in that desert almost 80 years ago. Yes, this movie is long, probably 35 to 40 minutes too long, but it never drags. It keeps you engaged throughout the entire movie, and it's a fantastic history lesson in movie form. 5 butter pumps. Go see this movie. So now I turn it over to you, my beautiful butter babies. Have you seen Oppenheimer? If so, what did you think? How many butter pumps would you give it? Sound off down below. I want to hear all about it. Thank you so very much for watching, commenting, and subscribing, butter babies. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.